how how many founding co-partners do you have in this and what you've been building, Tim, with creators?
Yeah, I have two other co-founders
Two other
of our business.
co-founders.
Yep.
Awesome. And I saw a pretty fun promotional video a while back. You guys have 7 co-living houses right now. What is a co-living house?
Yeah. So essentially, a co-living house is more or less kind of like a commune, and it's where we place like-minded people to essentially live together in a shared space. And we're totally redefining what quote unquote like apartment living is, because apartment living, you can kind of like go into your space, you can get away, you can be alone. And kind of the crux of our whole vision is how do we push people together? How do
Mm.
we almost force people to have conversations and to be in community?
That makes sense. And as a as a married man with been married and with 4 children, I like, whoa, this is different for me. But when I was younger and when I was a bachelor, I could see how this would have been something that I would have won. It would have probably made living expenses cheaper by renting a house with other people. But too, like you said, it keeps you from falling into the grasps of isolation. Is that kind of your target demographic? Younger people, or are you guys also mixing in older people? What's that look like?
It is. Yeah, right now, where we find loneliness to be the most acute is with Gen Z and also millennials. And for us, we really want to surround people with like-minded folks that are going to help them become the best version of themselves. And I think as Gen Z has kind of graduated and went to college really in the pandemic, and so many of those people were isolated while they were doing learning, while they were at college. And I think for me and my experience in college, I really was able to find myself and to learn what's inside and be able to articulate myself. And I feel like so many people in that younger generation were kind of like robbed of that opportunity. And I feel like the pendulum has really swung in the direction of isolation, and especially with technology. I feel like the more technology we have, the more it exasperates the problem of isolation and loneliness. And so, really, what we're trying to drive to is, connecting people in these houses. And you've probably heard these cliches before, like, hey, you're the average of your five best friends. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Show me your five friends, I'll show you what it would be in 5 years. But I really do subscribe to that. And at the end of the day, the people you live with are the ones you spend the most time with. And we believe that like doing life alone is the lowest expression of yourself, because I think
Mhm.
it's through experiences with other people that stretch you and open up your world and challenge you and hold you accountable. And I feel like if you live alone, you're there's this gravitational pull to do the thing that's consistently easy, which doesn't, build the character and the resolve and push us to become the person we're called to be.
I love that. There's a lot I want to touch on. I'll see if I can remember it all. One of my favorite movies is a movie called Into the Wild. And in that movie, this young man is trying to figure life out and, like going around having all these great experiences. And the tragic ending I'm going to ruin it for everybody, but the tragic ending is he dies, on this wilderness journey. And when they find his van or they find him and, he suffered pretty badly in his lonely death, he had scribbled a note right before he died that said, happiness isn't real. Happiness is only real when shared.
Mm,
And so there's this beautiful epic story of him going and figuring life out and coming across people and like having partial relationships, but in the end he tragically dies alone,
mm.
and it's not a pretty ending. But it is a very compelling story, and it's one that we should definitely consider. The point and the moral of his parents releasing, approving that film too, is like don't end up like this. Don't put yourself in this situation. And so you're combating that, and you talked about the cliche of these sayings, but this show is not about me, right? This show is about people who may not have heard this stuff out there. So I'm going to say a little bit slower what you said. great resource. Gary Vaynerchuk often talks about the same theory and thought. We're very much made up of the 5 people who we spend our most time with, or we allow them to influence us so much. So
Mhm.
I can absolutely see how being involved in a house or a community where those people have been curated and selected based on similarities. I mean, that is really cool. And I hope you guys are looking at the opportunity to influence parents in relation to that,
Mm.
because I think a lot of those individuals, um, they may not be willing to take that step by themselves. But if you guys can create an environment where it's trustworthy enough for parents to say like, "Wow, I want my child in this. I can't do it myself." It takes a tribe to
Mhm.
raise a child, an adult child, so to speak. Like that's amazing what you're doing. I think it's really cool.
Thank
Further
you.
thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think, you know, where our whole business started was, I went through this loneliness bout in my own life that really gripped me during the pandemic. And I moved from New York City to Austin. And I started to adopt this victim mentality that I'm never going to meet people that are creative. I'm never going to meet people that have this level of drive. I'm never going to meet people that kind of have that, like, or an Imagineer at heart. And that started to very quickly become my reality because I was isolated and because I wasn't out there and I didn't have connection. And because I didn't have friends in Austin yet, I started to, like, it became a self fulfilling prophecy. Like, these thoughts that I would have in my mind, that then became my reality. And I had to break free from that because I realized that if I want to attract those people, I need to be the one to essentially cultivate that. Like, I need to be the one out there. And, for me, from that point, like, I broke out of that and I found one or two people that are now my best friends and business partners. And, my, what I would say, guiding principle in my life is really to help people, and more specifically men, unlock their God-given potential and really, like, live life on purpose. And I think there are a lot of people now, especially in technology, they work these amazing jobs at some of these incredible companies. They get paid a lot of money, but they feel this void inside and they feel like they're created to do more. And there's this golden handcuff, so to speak, too, that makes it so hard to leave. And I went through that in my own life, but
Mm,
I really believe that, if people kind of understood what they were created to do, or that they could do more, and that they could they if they found the right people, you found your tribe, you could do that thing you've always wanted to. And I think it takes a lot of courage, a boldness, and faith to take those shots. So really, for us, the foundation is, like, if you live with these people that are like-minded and going to push you in your purpose and calling, that's like ground zero. And if we can get that into people and
yeah.
be surrounded by those quote unquote like-minded people, we think so many great things can happen from that. And honestly, we've already started to see it, and our business is very new. And we're in the physical realm. Digital products are a little easier to create, but we're talking about houses, we're talking about living spaces, and there's a lot that goes into that.
Dude, I love this. You're proof that people can make that shift and change, right? You had to go through this. You had the golden handcuffs like you talked about. I'm like the exact opposite of your story. And so I'm looking at this from, again, that opposite perspective of like, all right, how do we influence leaders like myself to also listen up? Especially those of us, I'm getting there. My kids will be this age at some point where they have to move in with somebody. And like you're helping
Mhm.
incept me to realize like, okay, like I might have to teach them the value of doing this. When I was 17, I told my mom, "Mom, I'm graduating early or I'm dropping out. Take your pick."
Mm.
I was leaving no matter what. There was no stopping me. I was ready to go. Granted, and again, some of us had certain opportunities pushing us out too. Like I had my dad's credit card. So one, like, I was gonna be fine if I got into a bind. Two, I got in my little 1990 Isuzu Trooper. This was in 2006, 2005, right? So an older car, but I drove that all the way to my school in Utah by myself. My dad gave me a gun. Put it under your seat. If you need it, use it. That isn't that
Wow.
nuts? I didn't have a license. If I'd done that, I would have been in prison. I didn't even know that. But yeah, that's how open we were back then. I was like, it's just like, I'm just going. And so I get to Utah and I go into this restaurant, all the tables are massive in Utah because they're massive families. And like I couldn't find a two top. And so I'm sitting at this massive table alone. There's all these families, and finally it's starting to sink in like crap. What am I doing? I'm the only person I know here. So like a little bit of desperation, I call my sister up, and I talk to her on the phone while I eat. And then I go to school though, and I end up in a dorm, a co-living space, right? And I mean, it was one night difference, and bam, I got friends like crazy, and I'm just going. And my mom's calling, every week, and I'm like, "Mom, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I just wanted to say, Mom, I'm busy right now. I love you. I got to go. Bye." Click done. Like I was hook, line, and sinker moved into this new co-living experience. But again, if we don't learn as leaders in the world that that's not how everybody thinks and sees and does things,
Mhm.
then our ability to impact is super limited. So from your background, Tim, what are three resources that leaders can pay attention to, could have on their radar to help them with their visions? It could be books, could be movies, anything.
Yeah, this might sound a little bit cliche, but um, I think as a man, it's hard to give other people the authority to speak into your life. And for me, I would say number one is we'll call it like mentorship or like leadership. Like, who is that person in your
Mm,
life that you give the authority to rebuke you, to correct you, to give you advice? Because I think in our culture and society, it's like, hey, you got to be your own person. You got to figure it out on your own. And I can tell you point
yeah,
blank, so much of my growth in my own life has come from those moments from other people that I have given that authority to speak very sharply into my life that hurts at times, but I know they're doing it from a place of love. But that pruning back and that sort of correction in my life is the thing that's probably propelled me forward
I love
the
that.
most.
That's
Um,
huge. I have to double down with you on that. Um, Everybody in life to me is a mentor. I have no problem with anybody giving me that type of feedback. I
I love
also have
that.
healthy boundaries. Like somebody comes at
Mhm.
me nasty, I don't really need that in my life. And so I will separate. But can I take it and handle it and know that I'm sensitive? Yes, absolutely. But it is because of my openness and willingness to be mentored by all. Go ahead. Next.
Yeah, next, I'm going to say this book called Way of the Warrior, written by Erwin McManus. He's probably the most influential thought leader in my own life. That so many things says really ring true, and even in that book, he talks about like the way of the warrior is to fight. And I know you and I were talking about that offline a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think it's like that warrior's heart. It's like we have to be able to like pick up our sword. We have to be able to want to do the work. We have to be able to like want to be on the playing field. And I think a lot in this day and age, it's really easy to be a spectator on the sidelines. And it's really hard to be that man in the arena. And that book is all about, finding people that can, again, a community of people, like find your tribe. The lions run with the lions, the gazelles run with the gazelles, and the zebras run with the zebras. Like find your tribe. And that's kind of the ethos of the whole book. And honestly, it kind of underpins what we were talking about before. It's like, hey, find those find those people in your life that are going to, keep you on the straight and narrow, so to speak, and put wind in your sails.
Dude, I determined not to color comment on this one. And then you happen to talk about fight. Those of you who were not present, right, before we went live, I almost killed the premise of this show by overreacting to the word fight. And my new mentor, Tim, was able to pull this concept up. And I was like, you know what, we'll run with it and we'll see. And sure enough, my perspective is now healthier on the reality that, okay, there's the semantics battle of, do we fight or do we just accept and allow things to flow? But
Mhm.
I'm with you on that. There are elements of fight that are important, and resilience has to do with it. There's of course toxicity associated with an overindulgence in anything, but to be able to stand your ground and to be able to move your mountains, it takes some grit. It takes some dedication, and so thank you for bringing that up. And The Way of the Warrior, great book. What else you got? You got
Yeah.
one more?
Yeah, last one. I am a man of faith, and this dovetails into the fighting. I'm going to keep going on this
Yeah,
point,
I like it.
but the Bible has taught me so much of what it means uh, to how to live my life. And even I'll bring up the story of David and Goliath. Like there are things that are opposed to us, and sometimes we do need to pick up our stone. We do need to fight, and even fighting for what do we fight? I'm fighting every single day for the relationship with my wife. And there are things that I encounter in my day to day that are opposed to that. And for me, it's really taking a principled approach to my life. And uh, one of the principles in the Bible is the upside down kingdom. It's like whoever is first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And I think, if we had a little bit more of that humility, is the people that have capability to lead, to speak, to articulate themselves, they have the resource. If they can put themselves last, and if they can, there is like a responsibility when you have been given something. And I'm someone that wants to be a good steward of everything that's been placed in my hand, and I want to be able to multiply it. And the Bible has been a guiding light for me throughout my entire adult life and hasn't steered me wrong yet.
It's amazing. Sometimes again we get caught up in the word, like I almost did, and then you're just making space for me to think through that. We decided to move forward on it, and when David fought Goliath, right? There's different ways that he could have gone about that fight. He could have tried to arm wrestle him, right,
Mhm.
or like literally wrestle him and go head to. He used his assets in order to make that victory more strategic. And I think sometimes where people get obsessed with the idea that no, we should never fight, is what they're trying to say is we shouldn't go about this way. We shouldn't make this harder than it
Mm.
has to be, versus being able to use your resources to slay the giant, so to speak, in a way that um, doesn't put you in a position of harm. And then I'm with you too. Then there's the stories like Jericho where they were instructed to just walk around the building, until for whatever reason God made the walls fall. So lots of ways we can look at that. This is also why Vision Pros, we talk so much about intuition, trusting in your heart and your mind in the process, whether you call it meditation, prayer, or just going on a walk and thinking through things. You are the visionary of your life. So this is already a fantastic episode. Even still, we're going to take a little break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about Tim Stanton's vision at large, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome in to Vision Pros Live with Jackson Callum. I'm your show host. We will be doing interviews for visionary entrepreneurs and guest leaders who are building fantastic visions out there. Hey, what's up? And welcome in to another episode of Vision Pros Live. I'm your show host, Jackson Callum, founder and CEO of First Class Business. And I'm excited to have a new mentor on stage today. His name is Tim Stanton. Mentor, I've only met him twice. And he's younger than me. So how can that be? Why? Well, he's got a paradigm and perspective on a purpose-driven living opportunity that relates to really helping the younger generation understand the power of diving deeper into relationships. And that's something that if I'm going to have an influence on my children as they get to that age, then I need to be willing to have an open heart and mind on how to influence that. And so a lot of the things that you'll learn today about Generation Z, my generation, millennials, and younger, it may be applicable to the older generations too. But if you're a leader, then you're likely going to be in situations where you're leading those types of those age ranges. And it's very important that we learn how to listen and understand where they come from. So before I bring Tim back on stage and we dive deeper into co-living and overcoming this loneliness epidemic that some of us may be kind of aware of or avoiding, but I think there's a lot of purity. I think there's a lot of value and even a lot of happiness that can come from understanding where people are at with this. I want to also highlight some resources that can help you as visionaries with growth. One of them is Melissa Gray's The Law Spot. The Law Spot is an entity that simplifies the legal processes. I literally almost canceled our show when she came on the show because I don't like to talk to lawyers. Most of them are very pretentious and condescending in nature. And so I was like, you know what? I got to honor this and move forward with it. And I did. And I'm so glad because she's a nurturer first and she knows how to relate to individuals. And what she's building is kind of that middle ground between LegalZoom's free documentations that don't necessarily leave you with the right protections and the traditional lawyer that's a massive retainer that cost me $20,000 when we were protecting our own trademarked name at Restaurant Connect. she created this thing called the Spot On business blueprint to help you understand it's not only about protecting your firm, but it's also about growing and strengthening your network and having somebody on your side when it comes time to talk about mergers and acquisitions and beyond. So feel free to check out that. And we're going to move over to the Healing Institute with Permelia Parham. Permelia has a couple of decades on me in life as well, and I appreciate the tenure of those who've paved the way before us. She's building an international wellness community and inviting practitioners in the emotional healing, energy healing, integrated healing therapies, and coaching spaces to come together to create a network that not only allows patients or clients to find you and work with you, but it also is a network that's unique in that it pulls you together in a mastermind style of interactions. And her big goal right now is to get this program to where she's got over 1,000 registered practitioners in there. So if you're in the health and wellness space or in the naturopath space, this may be something that is worth being involved in. And she's going to be looking for strategic partners, board members, equity stakeholders as she continues to build out this brand. In a world where 8 billion people are, in essence, most of these individuals are lost to some degree. They're walking through life saying, I'm fine, when they could have more out of life. And so I'm looking forward to more practitioners coming together and seeing how do we solve that problem on a global scale. Then there's the Water Project. When the Water Project came across my radar, I couldn't quite relate to it. I had to force myself to. I've always had water. I've never been thirsty in my life. I found out that there's millions of kids and people, human beings, who do not have access to clean drinking water. And I was like, I just can't ignore this. I need to find a way to learn more. And the Water Project does just that. They actually show you what they're building in different communities. When you select a community that you want to support, and you can learn as much as you want to about that, they give a lot of information. And once you donate, you then become part of that community. In essence, they show you the development of the project, and the project gets completed. It's one of the most transparent organizations that I found. This picture always gets me because these kids are celebrating water like my kids celebrate Christmas Day. And that's a really, really humbling thought. So if you're not in a position to give back financially to this, but one of your friends or family members comes to mind right now who might be interested in learning about it, then do us a favor, share the Water Project with others. We got 8 billion people to help, and we can make a difference together. You'll never know the ripple effect of the good that you do, but I promise you, sharing is one of the fastest and greatest ways to make a bigger impact beyond yourself. And then go meditate on what that impact may look like in their lives. And it can hopefully touch your heart and empower you to continue to do more and more good. Without further ado, Tim Stanton, thanks for joining us on Vision Pros Live.
Thanks, Jackson. That Water Project, wow, that's I was feeling emotional there.
Yeah, wow.
Something I never really think about. Yeah, that's
I'm
really
so
profound.
happy you said that, man. I really am, because then you're the ripple effect.
Yeah.
I rock the mic a little bit. I know I need to do more. That doesn't, it's like, no, we're done for today, guys. We're going to log off because I've done my good deed. No, life's about doing as many of those as you can. Let's maximize the good deeds. So I'm grateful that you got to see that. Tim, I usually ask the audience, I didn't today, but if you, Tim, or somebody else that's listening in knows of another project that you want to raise awareness for, just drop it in the comments, because that's how we raise awareness for all of the opportunities that we have to serve. So feel free to double down with me. So, all right.
You're doing a lot of good, Jackson.
Well, we're working on it. It makes me happy. What is your vision, Tim, for the people that you serve?
The vision for the people that I serve is to help them at the highest level achieve their God-given potential, and really wanting to see a generation that lives on purpose and understands that they have a calling on their life and that they can do something. It's like I always say, you can't help everybody, but you can help somebody. And essentially what we're doing is creating co-living spaces, which is shared living across a bunch of homes in Austin, and giving the people the opportunity to be surrounded by folks that are like-minded, that can really push them into their purpose and their calling.
That's fantastic. You define that so well. I'm not even going to ask a follow-up on it. We're going to move to your vision. So what's your vision for yourself? And you can go as far as you want to and as broad as you want to on this.
Yeah, I would say first, to be a great husband and a great father, I think to do anything great in the world, it takes so much sacrifice. And I think if you go down the line of people that have done great things from Steve Jobs to Tom Brady, there's so much sacrifice. And one thing that I'm very cognizant of is like, am I sacrificing time with my family? Am I
For
sacrificing the
sure.
relationship with my life or even my parents? So for me, I really try to make sure I have that as number one priority. And when family's good, in my opinion, everything else flows from that can be good and great as well. And I would say that would be first to be a great husband and father, and then two is to really build up my neighborhood, my community, and my city. And at the end of the day, I think in this age of isolation and loneliness, do we even know who lives next door? And I think there's so many beautiful things that this
Mm.
digital realm has brought us, but similarly, it's knowing the name of the neighbor next door. And you and I being millennials, there was a day and age where we borrowed sugar from the person next door, and I can't
I
remember the
still do
last
it.
time that happened.
I still do it. I got
You
rejected by
do.
6 neighbors in a row the other day. I was like, "Man, this is not what life used to be like." I finally found
Yeah,
one
it's
who was able to who was not like, "Hey, I'm sorry I don't have" it was milk. And I was like, "I don't have milk right now." And then so my recipe is like waiting on me. So I go home and finally look for substitutes. But I was like, wow, the world has changed.
yeah. And maybe to continue to piggyback on that point, even in the digital world, there has been so much change. And I believe change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And we really want to impact a generation to be growth minded. Like, what does it mean to have a growth mindset? And that's something that we really want to instill. And I think with all the resource and the information we have, there's almost this paralysis by analysis that occurs.
Yeah.
And there's so much of getting outside of your home, getting outside of your environment, and I believe the best experiences we have in life are offline and in the real world. And our whole premise of what we do is people living together to have more of those experiences.
Your vision is super important too. You'll notice, guys, I did this just the other day and I got rejected. So what? I'm still gonna do it again. It wasn't the last. I know my neighbors next door. They didn't happen to be home, when I needed it. So I
Mhm,
went knocking on other doors. And again, I'm that guy who at 17 years old went to school with an unregistered gun underneath my seat. Like I'm not really scared of doing things and being outside the box. But one of the things we have to do if we want to cultivate those style of relationships is we have to try and try again. Now if we live in a community that is unsafe, then perhaps it's better not to, it's probably better
mhm,
to keep a low profile in certain circumstances. But if your community is not unsafe, one of the best things you can do to create safety is to create connection with those of your neighbors. And if we're the leaders who do that, the byproduct is there are certain neighborhoods that still kind of feel like the 90s out there. But
mhm.
it's on our court to do that. I got to ask you though about family. You talked about how um, do we sacrifice our time with our family? And I said, yes. Right. So my question for you, Tim, this is not to challenge the vision, but to just expand upon it for all of us. If you could be at Disneyland with your child all day long, every day, without having to worry about any responsibilities and beyond that, do you believe that's best for your child? Or is there a balance between like, you know what? Do I have to? Because my daughter, she went to a dance. In fact, last week she went to girl camp for a week during my 2 week on period when I get to have
Mhm.
her in my house. So it's like, well, I'd rather her be with me during that week, but I also value the leadership experience and chance she has to go build this network of good friends and a positive environment. So how do you balance that, Tim?
Well, first of all, don't have kids just yet, but will one day in the near future. But yes, I agree with you. I think Disneyland is an experience that is great, and it's something that I think can stir up a lot of wonder, and I think that's important with the younger generation. But I think also it's not about insulating our kids, and I think maybe what from my perspective, some parents get wrong in this day and age is life, and maybe we feel life is about happiness. Like life is about getting to this point where I feel that every single day. And I believe life is about surrender and it's about sacrifice. Name like greatness requires so much sacrifice. And I think similarly, like those are things that our kids need to know, and there'll be days when they need to study, there's days when they need to go outside and play instead of being on video games and doing things that are hard and difficult. And so I don't think insulating, and maybe I'll equate going to Disneyland as feeding your kids sugar every day. It's like, are
Mm.
you going to build a healthy body, a healthy perspective? And life's about doing hard things. It's about working. It's about wonder. It's about creating. So I think putting family first can really mean putting your kids in maybe more difficult situations for them to learn social skills, learn how to engage with adults, so on and so forth.
I love that. I hope parents take that to heart. The one, especially you parents who are hard on yourselves for not being there enough for your children. It's so easy to look at Instagram and feel like you're not there. And feel like, oh, you don't
Mm,
have all the wonderful things that all these other families have, but you're looking at the highlight reel, and the moments, not the day-to-day
mm,
aspects. And I see a lot of parents beat themselves up, shortchange themselves because they have a responsibility as a provider too. And maybe it's maybe Tim's wife could be jealous, right, of him spending time with Jackson on a podcast versus, always spending all of his time with her. I don't think that's the case, but we go through elements like that in life. And while it's important to be there for our family and our loved ones, it's also important to, appreciate that you're probably doing your best. And if you're doing your best, you can't let others' opinions or feelings get you down because you can only do your best. Speaking of, let's talk about the worst leadership experiences ever. What is your worst leadership experience that you've ever had, Tim?
man, I'm pulling some skeletons out of the closet, Jackson. Uh, my worst leadership experience actually came from uh, being in a church, oddly enough,
Hmm.
and uh, had a moment where the things that were maybe preached on stage and the things that were being done behind the scenes, there was this cognitive dissonance between those two things. And I think that was incredibly damaging for me.
Hmm.
And like in that moment, I also realized that like leadership, there's a different level of responsibility required when you lead others. And I also realized like through that experience, the things I say and the things I do, like I know there's a gap, but like I'm working so hard to really like decrease that gap because I don't want other people to have a similar experience. And I think it's really hard to in my mind, that's what integrity is. What I say I am and what I do, like when those things are aligned, I believe that's integrity. So I went through an experience where I was under the leadership of a pastor, and there were some things that there was like this mismatch, and that was really damaging and just like hurt a lot. And I also realized too, though, that people are imperfect,
Yeah.
and we can't put this expectation on whether it's athletes or business people, and you can kind of like go down the line, like we and even politicians, we can't put this idea of perfection and project that onto other people and hope for them to be our savior, because at the end of the day they're imperfect people and they're going to let us down. And I think for me there's just been a shift, like people can do great things and be inspiring and be amazing leaders, but at the end of the day, like my faith and how I conduct my life shouldn't, be tethered to what Elon Musk does or what Joe Biden does. And I think for me, it's having a deeper understanding of how I'm called to navigate my life, and that's through my relationship with God.
I appreciate the perspectives a lot. In fact, you reminded me of one of my other favorite movies that I haven't seen in a very long time. I'll be sharing it with my kids in the near future, called 7 Pounds with Will Smith. And in
Mm,
that movie, the movie portrays him ultimately as a villain for the majority of the movie, like just attacking these people's lives and hurting these lives. And it's not until the end where you realize exactly what he's done and exactly why he's done what he's done. It's majestic. I'm not going to ruin the movie in this time. I ruined the other one already, but 7 Pounds, phenomenal way of seeing that. Okay, things happen for a reason, and sometimes our perspective doesn't see the full reason. Now, that's not to say that everybody does everything for virtuous reasons, but yeah, I've been in churches where I found out as a missionary that decades before, one of the church leaders had changed tithing to 10% to 30% to pad his own
Mm.
pockets, and that had a damaging, lasting effect on that local community. And it was this one leader's choice, not the actual entity itself, which is awesome and perfect. But it's important to develop the maturity to look through the perspectives. Fast forward years later, I was in a third world country where almost everybody was struggling to survive. And the pressures from that individual for his own particular family were probably almost insurmountable. And it's kind of like Aladdin stealing a loaf of bread, to be able to feed himself and Abu. Like there's layers of stories. And so while it's not okay to do things like that, I also feel a much more different sense of compassion these days when I come across those
Mm.
realities. But it's awful leadership, and we got to learn from those experiences, whether they're ours or others. What's the best leadership experience you've ever had?
I would say it's on the flip side of that exact same coin,
Hmm.
is I have been poured into and led and discipled by my mentor. His name's Phil Navoa, and he has opened up my world in so many different ways. And I think more importantly, he's challenged my thinking and actions at every single turn. And it's a really hard thing, like I was saying earlier, to give someone the authority to speak into your life. And I wouldn't tell anyone who's listening that you need to go and do that with just anyone. But, my friend Phil, I've looked at his life and he has the virtues that I want to grow into and step into. And he has the type of family and the type of children and the way in which he navigates his community. I'm like, I want to be able to do that. And he's a north star for me, and I think as a result I see the way that he's living and I see the fruit of the way that he's living, and I'm like, I want that. And so
Mm.
the best leadership experience I've had is giving him the keys to my car, so to speak, and the ability to speak into my life. And he was actually the one, when I was going through a season of loneliness, I started to adopt this victim mentality, to be like, hey, I'm always going to be like this. I'm never going to find people that are creative, that are, high octane, fill in the blank. And he's like, he cut off that mentality from me. And he said, you're, it's okay. People are victims, but to carry your victim mentality throughout your life is going to lead you to lead a very small life. And so in that moment, he spoke very sharp words that had to prune back that way of thinking, that I had adopted, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And there are many other examples with him where he's really helped me chart my journey, and I'm a better man for it.
I love it. Jake Larson of Video Power Marketing is my Phil Navoa. And
Mm.
it's, I love the analogy used of giving the keys. It made me think of like, okay, if I were to use something similar, I would say it's like a car caravan, and I'm part of his caravan. I guess I give him the keys if he asked me to. I might, but wherever he goes, I tend to say like, yeah, I like that milestone. I want to go that direction too. So having those mentors, having those people in your life, whether they're somebody, I don't talk to Jake very often anymore. We maybe talk
Mhm.
every 6 months at the maximum, at this point. And the more kids you have, the more that tends to say, you know what, I got a lot of stuff going on in life, more family members. But it is nice to know that when you have people like that in your life, you can kind of, you can, when you plug in, they're there. When they plug in, you're there. And it's wonderful to have that. Any further thoughts on that before we move on to the powerful lesson? I didn't want to
You
interrupt you.
know,
I
I
had something.
no, I think it really, like, as I say those things out loud, it maybe I'm having this realization now, Jackson, but like that is exactly what we want to have happen in these shared homes.
Yeah.
And we say, real roommates will check your ego. Real roommates will challenge your comfort zone. Real roommates will champion your success. And for you, it's like, don't push them away because they push you to grow. And at the end of the
Oh, I
day,
like
like you
that.
were saying, that caravan, it's like, you're right. Great teams make good player is great and average player is good. And I think it's like, what team are you on? I'm like, I don't need to be the best player, but I want to be on a team. And I think that's exactly what we're doing with Phil. I'm like, how do we take that and rinse and repeat and replicate that across every single one of our houses and continue to grow and scale our portfolio?
Dude, that quote is fire. Don't push them away because they push you to grow. That is so profound. I'm in love with that quote now. And now now you gotta double down. If this was your last opportunity to share a powerful lesson with other visionary leaders, what powerful lesson can other visionaries learn from your experience, Tim?
I would say I've really had to humble myself through this entire process. And I think I've experienced every single emotion under the sun in trying to build this. And I think to be a visionary and to be a great leader, there's such a large dose of humility. And I think for me, I got caught up in maybe like that the influencer economy where show your best, hide your rest, and you feel like you always have to have an insight and you always have to have something to give. And I think for me it's like to humble myself because I there's so many teaching moments that I'm able to absorb just in like my day-to-day learning from the people that maybe even I lead. And I think it's been a big perspective shift for me in the last like 6 months, operating from maybe like, hey, here's what I do have, but also now I'm on the flip side of this coin to be like, I have so much to learn. And, they're small lessons every single day. And I think it's just to lead with that humility. And you don't have to have everything figured out and you don't have to have the best insight. And you don't even have to have the best idea. And I can tell you, it's not the idea or the intellect or the ability. It's can you just continue to keep going and can you learn every day and be a sponge and absorb things from the people around you. And I think even saying that, it connects back into the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. And I'm super grateful because those 5 people, I got a lot to learn from those people every single day. And I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Wow. That it's one of my favorite topics, the aspect of humility. And you're so right.
Mhm.
Every time it feels like life is leveling up, you're getting into this new zone of like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. And when you can let go and allow other people to help you figure that out, it's a wonderful thing. But one of the big shifts that we've made over the last couple of months that has been the most refreshing and uplifting experience is we caught memo of this short by Jeff Bezos, where he was talking about their executive planning sessions and how they have their agenda and they take 15 minutes at the beginning so that everybody reads that agenda and make sure that they're up to speed. Nobody's getting left out because they were late or because they didn't see it in advance. And then they lead by having the newest person in the room speak first and give their ideas first.
Mm,
And they go in the order of seniority in the opposite order. And
wow.
it has been a game changer for us as a company.
Wow.
Everybody now speaks. Yeah, it is so cool.
Wow.
And
That's
I learned the
beautiful.
best things in it. I'm like, I would have never come up
Yeah.
with that. So
Yeah, because if you're more green or younger, it can be really if Jackson goes first, it's like, hey, this is really intimidating, and then I don't feel qualified to share my perspective. And I feel like that's back to that upside down leadership thing. It's like, hey, y'all go first. I'm gonna sit back and hear what you got to say.
it is so valuable. And all of a sudden, like, if you're the one leading the show all the time, your blinders get narrower and narrower and narrower. But when you
Mm,
step back and you allow everybody else to go first, you get to see all these perspectives, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so enlightening. So I'm glad you shared that again. Let's dive in. Let's talk about purpose-driven living. Take a few extra minutes on that, and taking the fight to the loneliness epidemic. We can either focus on like what's really going on with this lonely epidemic, or you can guide us to the questions I should be asking right now. All of us should be asking, Tim. What do we need to know, Tim? What are we overlooking?
yeah, and I would say for any great business out there, you have what we'll call like product market fit. It's like, hey, what is the problem that's going in this industry? And can you solve it? Like, what is the solution that you're bringing to the table to solve that problem? And I think for me, back, I think it was last May, the US Surgeon General wrote this report, and it basically stated that there's this loneliness epidemic out there in our world,
Mm.
and that the damaging effects from being isolated and being lonely is more it has more adverse effects on your psychologic on your psyche, but also your physical body, is smoking 15 cigarettes a day, or drinking consuming 6 drinks of alcohol a day, physical inactivity, and it just goes on and on and on. And it's not something, after I read this report, Jackson, like my biggest takeaway was there's not a silver bullet. There's not something the government can do to fix this issue. And essentially, they punted on this issue, and they punted it back to us. And they have some ideas to solve, quote unquote, solve loneliness, like create more parks. But at the end of the day, I think the problem we're facing is getting people out of their home and getting people out of environment that they are isolated in for hours or even days at a time. And I think this new economy that we live in, this work from home economy, it's really kind of like multiplied the loneliness epidemic. And even with some of the technology that's coming out with VR and AR, these different you can have any experience you want from your bed.
Yeah.
And so for what we're doing is we want to bring people together in shared living. And so people live together in a home, and these are like-minded people. And as I've alluded to, they push each other in their purpose, their calling. And really it's a layer of accountability in your life. And from where I sit, this is way more difficult to do with men than it is with women. And I don't quite know why that is, but I have such a passion for getting guys off the sidelines and into the game,
Mhm.
so to speak, because
Yeah.
I have friends that work at these tech companies and they make a lot of money and they live in the high rise downtown, but they might work from home 3 days a week and they don't see anyone for a really long time and they don't have connection. And they tell me point blank, like I feel this emptiness inside. So
Mm.
essentially what we're doing is bringing people together in the shared living, but our funnel, so if we're going back to like our business, we want to bring people to events, and we host these different events. We host a pizza party called Sauced, and
Mhm.
it's basically like, hey, get off the sideline and into the game. And it's just a networking event. It's like, hey, come meet these people and just meet someone. And we feel like if you can build enough momentum socially, it's like you met one person who then connects you into this community and then invites you to this lifting session that then invites you to this karaoke night. It's this like snowball effect. So we have a unique go to market strategy where for us, our go to market strategy is just to bring people together. Like I host a men's group at my house and we have 90 guys in that group. And it's like, come, we'll find room for you. We'll find a seat at the table. But from that, it's like they meet someone and then they realize too, and Jackson, I'll tell you this, the biggest like revelation that people receive is like, hey, what I know, I find so much fulfillment in my life when I know life is about not what I can get, but it's about what I can give. And I can tell you about 30 of those 90 guys have caught that. And honestly, when people kind of catch that revelation, it can change an entire neighborhood. It can change an entire community. It can change an entire city. And we really want to raise up a generation of generous people. And by living with other people that have the vision to quote unquote pay it forward, we believe that we can have an impact in our city. And I'll say it again, we want to take the fight to the loneliness epidemic. Like we want to crush the neck of the loneliness epidemic, and we're doing it one person at a time in shared living.
I love it. I absolutely love what you guys are up to and building the way you're going about
Oh,
it.
thank you.
The quotes that you've given today are phenomenal. I got to connect you to the founder of Hang Tight Social. He was on our show. We'll talk about that
Mm,
afterwards. I'd love to get that report from you, the Surgeon General's report, so we can add that to the show notes as well. Those of you listening in, we're going to have the action steps below as well as the resources on the pages. That way you can learn more for yourself. That way you can also connect with Tim, connect with the Creators Project, and see how they're doing things. I'm sure that if you're also interested in modeling this in your own city or hometown, that Tim would be a resource and would be happy to kind of mentor you through the process. Because guys, we got 8 billion people out there to help. And, this generation needs it. Yes, the next one does, but our responsibility as well is this generation, bringing these types of projects to life. So thank you, Tim, for coming on and sharing your vision. This was an absolute awesome experience and honor for us. Visionaries, my last invitation to you. If you haven't been on our show, there's a button in the top right corner that says Be Our Guest. Click that button. Tell us your vision. Come on, and you don't have to have the coolest vision in the world. You don't have to be at the Elon Musk level or the Tim Stanton level. We want you to be, if you're authentic, if you're striving to help others, if your vision is designed to be able to bridge a gap for people in need, then come on and tell us those stories, because we want to learn about the principles you're following. The principles are going to be what help us to get to our next levels as well. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building